My, how things have changed, especially in the miniature painting world.
Welcome to listening to Paint Try with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the hobby and art of miniature painting. I'm Mike.
I'm Dan. Thanks very much for coming and joining us today.
So Dan, before we get started, I wanted to take a moment and do a little explaining. We've been working on this podcast for quite a while, and there was a drop-off from when I did some of the interviews and when we're actually producing the podcast. Well, I kind of went through a little painting personal crisis of not, kind of losing the joy for painting and wanting to hang up the brushes and stuff. But I'm better now. I have an amazing support network of friends and people in the hobby and that have been just kind of helped me push through it. I got a mentor through a website, through a Facebook group and such, and so it kind of helped get me through that slump to where I am ready, pumped, and excited. I also have a great friend like you who kind of has been supporting me and just kind of letting me go through my crap and coming out on the other side. So thank you very much. And I apologize to those we interviewed for the delay and getting these out and such, but we're going to get rolling and this podcast is the real thing.
All right. So I think we could probably have a whole entire episode of like burnout and psychological effects of painting and how hobbies, get integrated into our entire life and how it can remedy those setbacks that we have sometimes. So maybe that's something we need to do around that time at some point. But one thing I do want to share is I got the notes last night on what we're going to do for the show because we do a lot of prep on this show, as you can tell. And I was really bored after I looked through what was going on, and I noticed some of the stuff that you were saying in your first little blurb there. And I went on to Pinterest because I was looking for some ideas for some bases I was doing. And this popped up on my feed, and I'm not really sure why it popped up on my feed, but I think it was super duper important to say it today. So it says, if you get tired, learn to rest, not to quit. And I think that's from Banksy, the artist dude who paints on walls. So I think that's super duper important in our hobby because we do get burnt out, and we hear it and we see it all the time on our Facebook feeds and groups about people who are just like, I'm tired of painting. I can't get my mojo. What do you guys do? Sometimes it's just take a rest. We take a rest when we're playing sports and when we're watching TV and when we're eating and stuff. We have to take a rest, and we have to do it in our hobby also, but don't quit because that's just defeatist. So I thought that was just really odd and I guess fatalistic, if that's even a word, that popped up on my that popped up on my I don't know if it's called a Pinterest feed or whatever it is, but it showed up on there last night right after I read it, and I was like, that's I got to talk about that. So back to the show. What's going on with you, Mike? Where are we going to go with this?
So today I thought maybe we would talk about, both of us have been we have different hobby journeys, but we've both started in the hobby kind of a long time ago. And I think, for today's episode, talk about some stuff that has really kind of changed and impacted the direction of the hobby of miniature painting, figure painting, etc. Even modeling and model train building has had a bunch of changes as well. And I think they're all spilling over. So kind of talking about that stuff, and so one of the things that's interesting is, and I've noticed that a lot of people kind of have the same story that I do, got into the hobby in high school a little bit, dabbled a little bit more in college, and then took like a 20 plus year break. And for me, it was when my son found my box of Space Marines, and I was like, ooh, I forgot how much I love that stuff. And then I got into some classes at Nova Open and where I met you and kind of fell in love with the hobby. Like, I think it was about 4 years ago, maybe.
I think it's been 4 or 5 years. Yes.
4 or 5 years. And I probably thought for a long period for about 2.5 years of that, I probably thought I was a serious painter. And then I kind of had the realization when I went through that existential crisis that I wasn't a serious painter yet, because I wasn't doing it. I wasn't painting. And so now that I've kind of had that revelation and been able to dedicate, and look backwards and see. But anyways, regardless of that stuff, more of just what are the things have changed? Like what's your background in the hobby, Dan?
Started back in high school, but my high school was like over 30 years ago. And I started playing with historicals and BattleTech as my first foray into tabletop games and painting. So I did that off and on, actually more steady than I did in the 2000s and the teens. After I had married and started a family and everything, I had to take a back seat for a little bit, like most of us do. So my background goes back 30 years. And actually, yours is probably pretty close to 30 years too. But it really didn't pick up again. I didn't stop though. I still read the books, GW books. I still like to pick up figures. I still like to pick up things and paint and put together. So I always had it as part of my hobby, but it wasn't in my face kind of hobby because military, regular job, wife and family and stuff like that. It takes a back seat, but I always dabbled in it until about 5 years ago when my kids were old enough to, talk and stand and poop on their own. And I was able to have some free time to do things. I went to Nova Open also, and that's where we both ran into each other, which happens to be the first one that really jumped out at me at like, hey, I need to learn something. What are the new things that are going on out there? And it was life changing because things were so different from the 2000s back. Oh, and I probably should add also is in the early 2000s, so from 98 to 2000, I did work for GW. So I was always in that part. So it was kind of hard just to have a cold stop on playing with GW figures and Warhammer for the most part. But it did trail off a little bit, and I wasn't into the gaming scene as much as I used to, or the painting scene. So that is kind of my history and background and where I came from.
Nice. So if I ask you the question, what has been a significant change in the hobby? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Man, that's such a loaded question. And we should have a show just on that.
Well, that's what this is. That's what this show is.
Oh, it is? Oh, okay. Wow, jeez. All right. So what has been the biggest thing? In the last 20 years, that's really hard. But I think...
How about one of the biggest things? I just want to know what the first thing that comes to your mind is.
So for me, I think it's not a system or a process or anything, but really I think the biggest thing that has happened for the hobby is actually it becoming acceptable and visible in the mainstream has changed the hobby a lot. It's no longer being down in the basement playing D&D, or in my case, hiding in the basement playing BattleTech, or every once in a while you see a couple folks, liking comic books and being ridiculed. It's front and center now, and it's totally acceptable. So you're getting everybody who was almost embarrassed or wasn't as vocal coming out. And that has opened up new avenues of media, has opened up new opportunities for companies. And I think it has expanded and exploded to where we are now. Because I can think of maybe 3 or 4 game systems back in 2000s, some handwritten ones back in the 90s and 80s, to now we have entire ecosystems based off of making a game and selling it and being crowdfunded. And this is not just something that happens every couple of months, but almost on a daily basis, we have games that are coming out. And they wouldn't be able to do that without support of customers and without people that enjoy it. So I really think being accepted for our nerdism or whatever fandom has changed the way things have. And that has added to better processes, better manufacturing, better quality games, better quality painters and paints and materials, And I think that I would hope that that's the root, and that's what I like to think is the root of it. So yeah, that's the biggest change I see, and I think just that one root cause has made everything else expand and explode. What about you? What have you seen change in the last 20 years or so?
Well, I think I had the revelation about a month ago when I was texting you saying, "Holy crap, there's a South Park episode on tabletop wargaming." And that kind of like just in my head, I was like, "Wow, this stuff has kind of arrived, right? We're at a kind of a renaissance of it." And they nailed it. I mean, they nailed the way it goes too, at least in my house, where my daughters meticulously read the rules to a board game and then beat my son at the game because he kind of doesn't know the rules. He just wants to play. And so, it's just it's a thing of beauty that you look at shows like Stranger Things, Big Bang Theory, South Park, all of it's out in the media, like you said. And I kind of piggyback off that a little bit. And I think one of the biggest things that's been a change to see for me is kind of the crossover of the different types of art forms, the acceptance of miniature painting as an art form, and then seeing artists take other art forms and incorporate them into miniature painting. 10 years ago, you would have never seen a model with a hand painted background. Right. It would all of it was assumed that it was going to be built and be 3D, but they incorporate kind of that 2D background with the 3D model, and all those different art forms are kind of coming together instead of just using acrylic paints, or back in the old days when you had to bust out the bottle of testers and tester enamels and hope that you didn't pass out in your basement painting because of the smell. To now. Yeah. I mean, God, just like you said, there's game systems out there every day. It feels like there's a new paint line or a new set of brushes every day that come out on either Kickstarter or every company that does models now feels like they have a paint line to support it. And,
exactly.
for me, that's great because I'm a paint slut. So I just want to try all the different paints and play around with them. And, I love brushes and stuff. It's I had the same problem with office supplies. And so I love office supplies. I love paint supplies and stuff along those lines. My true nerdiness in this coming out, right? But I think that kind of that move from just figure painting to where figure painting is incorporating other forms of art and watching kind of the spillover, right? When even back a while ago, I knew there was a split between like the military historical modelers and the tabletop wargame modelers. Like, and they never crossed over, right? And so and they looked down upon each other, and like one does non-metallic metals, one does true metals, one's wrong. And so that type of stuff is kind of, while probably still exists here and there, it's really kind of gone away. And you see it especially in the areas of the military modeler shows, because if you look at their web pages from previous shows, every year they have an increase in fantasy and sci-fi and stuff along those lines, entries into their painting contests. And so just like this week, I actually went and joined the National Capital Model Soldier Society, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But they were talking about an upcoming show. And being that I'm a fantasy and kind of sci-fi painter, not a real, I do some historical stuff, but only on models that kind of catch my attention. They were talking about how every show they go to, it seems that it has more and more fantasy and sci-fi and stuff in the shows, and that it's kind of growing. And it's interesting because they did a presentation on different techniques, and a lot of the people there, I think I'm one of about the 20 people that were there. I think I'm the only real one or two of the only real acrylic painters. The rest of them are all oil painters. And so it was interesting to have that conversation about what a glaze means in oil painting versus what it means in acrylic painting. And in oil painting, it's more of the product, as opposed to in acrylics, it's more of the process, right?
Yeah.
Or the technique. And so just the stuff I had no idea, because I don't venture into oils, because I can't do the smell, man. It kills me. I can't even odorless thinner. It's a lie. But it gives me a migraine. That stuff after about 10 minutes, that stuff gives me a migraine headache. But
Yeah.
anyway, so long story short, the increase in the art form of miniature painting,
Yeah.
but there's also a lot of other things that have changed too. Because I have to tell you, Dan, when I first remember reading like White Dwarfs when they first were coming out and seeing all this stuff in there about, oh, use an ink wash to do this. There was no such thing as an actual ink wash product. Now, I mean, good Lord, I think that that's kind of a revelation. Something was huge that from when I painted originally to now coming back in, that inks, glazes, washes, holy crap, man! There's so many different products out there now. It's such I don't know, I don't even know where to begin with that stuff because that stuff in the hobby has changed so drastically too. It's a thing of beauty, but it's also a bit overwhelming too.
Yeah, because we wanted to just, just paint things, and every once in a while, we want to paint them good. And one thing I want to piggyback off of your piggyback about the quality of painting and the types of paintings and stuff is one of the things I was thinking of is as we were moving or being more accepted as an art form, that classically trained artists and traditional artists have we have I have seen them transition into this. Either it be for the fun of it, for the challenge, or something they truly like and want to bring into it. But I think that has really upped the hobby side of miniatures because they're the ones that are bringing these techniques over that have been used for hundreds of years that as hobbyists we don't think of. The companies that let's say the last 10 years has been like, hey, all you have to do is put one coat. If you want a shadow in there, you can do it. If you want a little highlight to make it look a bit more natural, knock yourself out. But like you said before, now we have, a line of washes. We have a line of glazes. We have a line of super mixtures of stuff that someone, 150 years ago came up with. And for us, it's, it's wow, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. No one has ever thought of that before. But the traditionals were like, yeah, we've been doing that for like 20 years on your figures. And it seems to work pretty good. And I think that you can also see the increase in the quality of the paint jobs and art competitions also. You can really tell that the traditional artists really bring a lot to this game. And some of us gamers need to work a lot harder to catch up.
Well, and I think too, what's happening, like you see it like, this is, we're recording on a Friday. Tomorrow at a Games Workshop, they're having a painting contest by me that I have an entry prepared for. But the quality of the entries, even at like store level competitions, has snowballed. Like it's kind of like, oh, wow, you get like, even when I first started, like, back again in the first competitive piece I painted did win a store show, like a store competition. I look at it now compared to what I'm painting. I'm like, holy crap, this wouldn't even get a finalist and apprentice level. Like this wouldn't even get this wouldn't make the cut in in kind of the low level competition. But now it's changed though. Now, you got to really kind of push yourself. Yeah, the level of artists are just absolutely amazing out there. And I just kind of every day almost on Instagram, I find somebody new to follow.
Oh, that's not even a joke, man.
Yeah.
I just wish more people would follow me.
I had that same problem.
They're just like, what is that? Swipe left or swipe right, whatever, which one it is. Like, no. I don't know. I'm too old to play that game.
You're on. That's Tinder, Dan. That's not.
Whatever.
That's an entirely different type of art form.
Hey, that's a really hot looking model. Oh, wait a minute. That's the wrong kind of model.
Right.
Never mind. Just that's me being an old guy. Dad jokes.
Right. Absolutely. I can appreciate that for sure. I get in trouble for dad jokes all the time.
Yep, I do.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about too with this is the differences in materials. Like looking back at the old the Rogue Trader 1 Space Marines, or old school Ral Partha. And here I'm even going to throw one out that maybe you haven't even heard of this game, called Traveler. They had miniatures for that game as well. And this is before Games Workshop, etc. It was a game my brother used to play. Mm-hmm. Those miniatures, the quality of them back then, we thought were awesome. Like, wow, look at these things. Now, if you take like a Rogue Trader 1 or a Ral Partha and compare it to current Games Workshop plastics, or you look at a company like a metal company like Dark Sword Miniatures, and you're like, wow, that the world has really changed, and as far as the quality. Plus, something that wasn't as prevalent 15 years ago is the introduction of resin, which just totally upped the game as far as details and granted price, but I mean, it really had a major impact, I think. And resin is probably my favorite to paint over plastic and metal, but plastic is getting close to almost the resin level of detail, and it's impressive.
Well, that goes back to manufacturing and how we progressed over the last 20 years. People had to do their sculpts by hand. They had to make a cast of it, and then they had to pour it, and do all those other things. And it didn't take for them to just someone to step on it the wrong way, or for them to make the metal a little off, because that's why we had 5 hours worth of mold lines that we had to scrape off with a heavy file, where, like you said, now the technology is there with materials and in manufacturing, where they can churn something out on a computer program, make a cast of it, or a 3D print, which we will have to get into at another time, right, and then burn off 1,000 copies of it. That's definitely life-changing, because they can do a couple test models and say, hey, how do these really work? How do they play? How do they fit? How do they feel? And if you're like, well, we don't like it, it really is as simple as going back and either changing a couple things on a computer or remaking it on a computer, and have something within hours almost, if not a day or two, where before it would take months to do it. So this, the increase in time, or was it the decrease in the time needed? Actually, just cross that whole time thing out. We don't need that part.
Okay.
So yeah, it all comes together. Everything that we can talk about in the next couple of minutes, and stuff that we've started that we've already talked about, have culminated to where we are right now, and why miniatures have changed so much, and why they're becoming mainstream, and how technology and just time has improved it for us. Because, hey, I'm enjoying this renaissance that we're having, man. It's been fantastic. And at times it's been overwhelming, because we don't know, what we can do. What should we wait for? I didn't have the imagination for half the things I see out there nowadays. And, I think all the creatives out there that come up with it, because, hey, it fills my need and my fantasy need and stuff. And it's, hey, so I'm enjoying it. I'm sure there's lots of other people too that are enjoying it.
And that is such an amazing thing that's out there too with technology, because through the internet, with YouTube, Facebook, Patreon, all that stuff, mm-hmm, it is definitely a renaissance, or you might want to call it a heyday of miniature painting. I mean, if you go into YouTube and type in how to paint NMM steel, you got 50 videos.
Exactly.
At least you want to learn how to glaze. Not only that, there are people who are amazing teachers out there that are doing wonderful videos that actually, back in the day, you might get an instruction booklet that, like that old joke about, here's how to draw an owl. First, draw a circle. Step 2, fill in the rest of the owl. Right. So you would get those painting brochures every so often with paint kits that you bought. Mm-hmm. Now they take you from beginning of the model to the end of the model, or you could do techniques, or just the stuff that's out there. And if you want even more, you can do coaching over the internet through Discord or Patreon or Skype, like we're using Skype right now. So that, throw in Facebook as all the groups that are out there. I mean, like when I open up Facebook, there's a list of groups recommended to me that I've never even heard of before that have thousands of members. And
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
there's so many, like I'm already a member of like 15 painting groups. I can't keep up. It's overwhelming, and finding the right one for you is kind of tough, but that's a good problem to have, right?
Yeah, it definitely is. And we both know also that when you go on one of these groups and it says you have 50 friends that are also part of this group, most likely you're going to see most of that stuff in other places. It's not just one location. And then unfortunately it starts to bog us down a little bit when you have to scroll through like 5 pages of the same figure, but they don't know who else is out there, and they're just trying to get the most reach when they're asking questions or showing off how awesome their stuff is. So I totally get it, and I accept it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. The only thing that is annoying is the people that constantly post across different groups that they spilled their pot of wash. And I'm like, okay, everybody's done it. Enough. I get it. Put it in a dropper bottle, or get the Games Workshop stand so you don't knock your stuff over. Or how about this? Close your pot. Science, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so much has changed. It's such a great time to be a miniature painter and be in this hobby. The one thing that would have been nice, well, I'm sorry, not would have been nice. The one thing that is nice though is there are low budget options out there. Like if you're somebody who wants to paint miniatures, but you don't have a ton of disposable income, which this hobby's expensive. There are options for you. Things like Reaper make Bones miniatures, which are substantially cheaper. The plastic isn't as good as a regular plastic miniature, and the detail isn't there, but they are fantastic for what they are. Often they're $3 to $4 a model. Sometimes you can get bigger models for $10, $15, which is awesome. Or if you pay attention to Kickstarter, they do a Kickstarter every couple of years. And you can get, like, for example, the last Kickstarter I backed was for $100, and I got 187 miniatures. Probably more than, right there was more miniatures than I will probably paint in my entire lifetime, but they're good to practice on. Even if you're an experienced painter, you can practice on them, etc. I think WizKids also makes multiple lines of cheaper miniatures. Those are the pre-primed with Vallejo primer ones. Personally, don't like them. The mold lines on those are kind of impossible to get rid of, but they're an option, especially if you're a gamer who wants to put some painted miniatures on the table, not spend a ton of time on and not spend a ton of money on them. Well, there you go. So there are some great cheaper options that are out there as well. So that's a nice aspect of it, because part of what I was worried about when I came back into the hobby five or so years ago was how expensive the point of entry was. But now it seems to be, even Games Workshop are doing the cheaper boxes of like the push fit models that are monopose models that are easier to get access to or easier to enter into the hobby with. And so that's kind of a huge thing, because I remember, man, I bought that box of 30 Space Marines for $15 back in the day. And I was like, wow, okay, that's a lot of money, but all right, for little tiny plastic soldiers. Now I'm missing those days where, it's $60 for a fig.
Yeah, that's true.
Excuse me, sorry. But anyways, so we've got, let's see. Hold on a second, let me get back to the Skype thing before we move on. So right now we got about 30 minutes recorded material, which is great.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to close out on that with, or
what? That's all we have is 30 minutes. Oh, okay. No.
I mean, because
if
then
we're gonna go, we can. I'm sure we can keep going. I mean, we have another section that we can talk about, or we can just stop there and then do a different show with other stuff, because we could probably run how I don't know how long it would take for us to go through what's on our desk and what else we're doing, but we kind of touched on that.
Well, I mean, we probably still have about 10 more minutes worth of content and what's on our desks and stuff. And so if that's okay, that'll put us at about 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine. And then we could do a half an hour or 20 minutes for whatever interview it's going to be, and that would be cool.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go from there.
So Dan, man, tell me what's on your desk. What are you working on right now?
All right. Well, many months ago, I purchased the Sisters of Battle box that everybody was all excited about last year. So it took me quite a while to come up with a color scheme, which I'm going to adjust again, but I do have the primary colors I want to be using for that. So that's some of the things I have on my desk, and of course, my new foray into BattleTech is taking up some of my time also. I'm just getting some of my old figures, repainting them, not all of them, but just some of them, rebuilding some figures, taking some of the new ones that I have, and just coming up with new color schemes for that. And I've been playing some too, a lot more than I used to, even back in the 90s. So there's a pretty active group here, and I've been pretty excited about it because that's definitely
the Kickstarter for BattleTech, right?
Yes, I did, and I think that has definitely jump-started Catalyst over the edge because I think they were kind of overwhelmed by the response that they got. I think it's like $3.5 million they made off of that Kickstarter.
Wow.
Something like that. I didn't look into it. But I was definitely a clan player back in the day, and for them to have this clan stuff is pretty incredible. They had to make up new add-ons. And what's that when you make a certain amount of money, they give you something?
Stretch goal.
Stretch goals. They had to come up with new stretch goals because they ran out after like $2 million because they didn't think anybody was going to be buying that much. Or they did, and they just faked us all out. But that one's going pretty well right now. So in the next couple months, I should start getting my first wave of figures in, which should be about probably 40 or 50, which is an awful lot. The second wave will be in November, which is another like 40 or 50.
That's a lot of
that's yes, it is. And what's really cool about it is you have different time errors. What's cool about it is you have different errors. You have different countries or factions that you can use just like every other game system. So yeah, you can have the exact same figure, but you could have different colors on it to represent a different army or something like that. So that's probably what they will end up being, either Mercs or what clan I feel like affiliating with. But so those are the really big ones that I've been sponsoring lately, just trying out new combinations of painting. Been doing a couple of videos, watching some stuff, trying to get some better ideas on how to paint, because that's what happens. That's what's the new thing, and what's the new quick thing that we can do, or what's the cool new technique that we can use on faces or eyes or skin or armor. So what about you? What are you working on?
All right. Well, what I'll say too is we're going to put on our Instagram and our Facebook pages pictures of stuff that we're working on. And you can follow us on Instagram at Listening to Paint Dry, or on Facebook at Listening to Paint Dry. Those are, pretty easy to get to.
And we probably should just we're going to post different pictures than we would post on the regular painting sites that we normally would.
Right.
That'd probably be a good thing to do, because
right.
Okay.
I've seen that one before.
Hey, wait a minute. I know that Dan now. No, I know. Oh my God, that's what he looks like. Oh, shit. I can't
Right. Well, so I have kind of two big projects right now that I'm working on. One is almost done. I purchased at the Nova Open last year the GW Primaris Convention exclusive lieutenant. I painted him as a Raptor Space Marine chapter, and I wanted to push myself in a lot of different areas. I sculpted with Magic Sculpt the chapter badge on his shoulder, on the backpack, and on the front of the plinth. Really worked towards pushing contrast. I didn't realize, a couple of people, I posted this on a Facebook group, Heavier Metal, that I'm a part of, was it Miniature Painting Tips and Tricks? Yes, Miniature Painting Tips and Tricks. That a couple people had pointed out that I was really almost at the point of non-metallic metal green, which was totally by accident, but very welcome. I didn't want to quite get there, but I was like, yes. Okay, so I'm kind of getting in. That's kind of a huge deal for me. I've been working with a mentor from the Heavier Metal painting group on Facebook with it. I'm not going to say his name because I haven't asked his permission to, but I will get permission from him by the next time we record. And the other one I'm working on is one that's by Gollum Miniatures. They have a line called the Muses, and right now there are 3 of them. I have 2 of the 3, but I'm working on one called Flora, which is an 80 millimeter figure. Definitely out of my comfort zone. A lot of flesh tone, lots of interesting shading and coloring and shapes with this. So I'm excited about really kind of tackling it. I'm going to try painting it with an alternative direction of light as opposed to just Zenithal lighting. I kind of want to. It is a woman standing holding a vase, and I want to kind of do the light coming over her right shoulder at an angle as opposed to doing it from the top. I have so in between episodes. Well, they're actually this would be after I already posted the review of Flora, so this would be. So I've already done a review of this model that we're going to post in between main episodes. So that's the model I'm currently working on, and we'll post some pictures on Facebook. I've kind of did the black gray white priming, but from a different direction, and then have done a bit of a light sketch as well. So that's kind of what's on my table. I have, there are a bazillion projects that I could possibly start, or I could actually finish ones I've started, but I really wanted to get onto this model because it's so different than anything I've ever painted. So what else is new with you, Dan? And you said that you have been getting in some BattleTech games. How's that been going?
It's been pretty cool. What is really awesome about a solid game system is that you can come back after 25 years and the rules haven't changed. Hint, hint, GW. So it didn't take but one practice game for me to get up to speed with movement, shooting, the phases, what I needed to roll in order to hit and wound, saves. It was so simple. It was just like, okay, I can't even believe that I've played GW or 40K for so long, because that's such an in-depth game. Now there is some intricate kind of rules, like, falling and things like that, and using your piloting skills in certain areas and stuff like that, and tactics, definitely, because it's definitely a different game than some of the other ones out there. But it didn't take very long at all. So, we play on Friday nights, and, I'm still trying to increase the number of mechs I have so I don't keep using the same thing. But it's been a lot of fun. To do it, and I'm glad I'm back into it.
Yeah, that's excellent. I know that gaming was a big part of the hobby for you. For me, unfortunately, it's not, just because I don't, I don't pick up a paintbrush till after 11 o'clock at night, really, most of the time. And so that's when my free time is.
Yeah.
And so I a lot of the skirmish games that are out there are very interesting to me, but man, I can't paint a squad now to save my life. I start it, then I get bored, and I can't. I don't know. I keep looking at entries for painting competitions, and I'm going to be the guy that has 12 for the single figure category, because that's all I can do these days.
I'm finding that squad based games is probably my niche, because I can paint enough of one thing and have a cohesive group, but I don't have to have 2,000 or 3,000 points worth of it. Like, I don't have to have 50 or 60 different figures and then vehicles to support them. And with a small skirmish size game, I could have 10 guys or gals, and that would, and that fits just right. So I think I'm hoping moving into the future, that's what my focus will be. I wanted the sisters to be my last, or I wanted them to be my next army. That's been sidetracked a little bit because of something else. But I've lost kind of that interest since the box set came out to build a full 2,000 or 2,500 point army with them, because it's, like you said, it's kind of hard to do squads upon squads of the same color scheme. And to tell the truth, these aren't the easiest ones to freaking put together and to paint either. I've had some difficulties. Maybe it's just my big fat fumbling fingers or my poor eyesight, but man, I've had some difficulty with these little 28 millimeters trying to, or heroic 32s, to put these things together and actually fit properly. The instructions just weren't suited for old people, and yeah, ageism is real.
The struggle is real, man. Well, I noticed it too when you I have two Sisters of Battle. I have the Sister Amelia anniversary battle sister, the one that Darren Lantham sculpted, that you could buy separately. God, months ago, long time ago.
Yeah.
And then I have the Canoness that you so generously gave me. Holy crap, man! I was looking at that Canoness and I was starting to put together Sister Amelia, and I'm like, these are on the brink of Malifaux, right? Like Malifaux style models.
They're pretty small. It's not a joke. And when you start getting into some of the other figures, they're tiny. We're so used to, in our game meta in here, 40K, we're so used to putting Space Marines and Primaris together that when we actually have a real size human, it's really small.
Indeed. And that's what, and that's what the detail is absolutely incredible. And even I make fun of Malifaux. The models, once they're together, are gorgeous. It's just getting them together is like, and that is I hate prepping models. I really doing mold lines. You made a joke about 5-hour mold lines. I would love for a figure to only take me 5 hours to clean, right? It takes me forever. And like, even when I was trying to do a squad, I set out to myself, I'm going to do armies on display this year for 2020. That's my resolution. Yeah, that ended within about a week. I was like, yeah, I'm done. Because, I would clean up a squad of Space Marines, think I had them done, put the primer on them, pick them up to start painting, going, crap, there's 3 mold lines on this one I missed.
Oh, yeah.
And just constantly missing mold lines. It's like the bane of my existence. Mm-hmm. And to take a squad and have to repetitively remove mold lines the same way on each model. I've got some new tips and tricks that I've learned, but like I got some stuff from a beauty sale place that actually helped me out a lot because they're very soft but sand dwell, etc. Mm-hmm. But dude, painting a squad, that's why actually like the Stormcast and the skirmish games of like Shadespire and Beastgrave, those intrigue me because that's 3 models. That's it. There's 3 models. 3 models I might be able to handle, but I can't do a whole freaking squad anymore, man. I am gonna try to do a squad for the Nova Open of probably my favorite Games Workshop models are the Stormcast Paladin Protectors. Mm. I love these dudes. They've got big giant speary things, and I'd probably give them a try. I just stripped them from what they look like old. And then I had the realization that, damn it, if you look up Stormcast Protectors on the Games Workshop site, you're going to see a picture of my Stormcast Protectors. They have from my Instagram feed up there.
Yeah, cool.
And so, I just stripped them, and I went, damn it, I should have just kept them and bought a new box. Anyway, sorry, I got diverted. I distracted from you. So you've been playing BattleTech.
Yep. So that's been my focus for a while. It's been doing, it's just playing BattleTech, painting BattleTech stuff. But I've also been trying to fill that niche of being a better painter. So I have been on Patreon, and I was lucky enough to get Trevelyan to do private lessons. So I'm pretty excited about that. We've had a few so far. I've learned a couple things. Some light bulbs have gone off. So it's just I don't get a chance to paint as much as I want to. So sometimes I lose some of those things. So I do go back through all my old books. I go through all my old notes, try to remember old recipes and things like that, and say, oh, try to help those light bulbs come back on, because man, I wish I could be 20 years old again and remember all this shit that I'm doing, because I've forgotten an awful lot. And it sucks because, man, I do enjoy painting. But it's also, it's not just that, but there's new techniques that are out there. There's different techniques. There's different ways of being taught. You can blend 20 different ways, but you never know the right one until you actually experience it. And those light bulbs have definitely been going off, and it really does help to have somebody who can walk you through those processes, or even just show you something different. So hopefully within the next couple years, I might have something that I can put in the show.
You have stuff you can put in shows. You just choose not to put it in shows.
Yeah, I think we already had that conversation.
Yeah. That'll be a common theme here. Yeah. Now, and it's sometimes you have to realize, and I think that's where a big revelation for me too, when I kind of came out of my funk, was I wanted to be a better painter immediately. You got to earn it. You got to practice. You got, there are some people out there that are naturally talented at this stuff. Good for them. I am not, but it's just that patience and practice. And, like a big area I worked on with the Raptor was glazing. I think just on his right leg, and I was counting just then, like just on his right leg. The rest of, if I would have counted the whole time, it would have totally depressed me. I think there are 27 layer of glazes per transition on each color transition at a minimum. It's crazy, but before 6 months ago, I would have given up at 5 layers and been like, I can't glaze. And it's just a matter of patience, you have to. And yeah, I have a tendency to work on the super thin side as opposed to thicker sides of glazes. And so, because I feel like my margin of error is larger because I'm still learning. And so I don't want to be that, oh, glaze. Ah, crap. Nah, I just totally ruined the transition. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so it's just a patience thing. And, Trevelyan's videos are excellent that I've seen. And so that's lucky. I wish you the best of luck with that, man.
Yeah, I wish me the best of luck too.
So I did something new. I joined the National Capital Area Model Soldier Society. And I've been, I've been looking for kind of a painting group or such along those lines. Now, this is great because, I joined Wednesday, and at the meeting they announced that they're no longer going to do their monthly painting group. They're only going to hold the meetings. I'm like, great. Yeah. I was like, was it something I said? But they weren't getting the participation that they wanted, and so they're actually going to incorporate painting into their monthly meeting. So,
and what's really weird is, and I don't know what that is, and then maybe it's a discussion for later on. We have these groups and we see them and we hear about them and we go to their stores and there's a lot of excitement, but then it's a very steep drop off after that first 2 or 3 meetings. I've seen 3 or 4 of them in my area, and we're not a very big area. It's usually the same folks or maybe newcomers coming in, but maybe it's getting to a location and painting. I think it would be a lot easier if we didn't have all this technology to help us out, because we would share through word of mouth and through the demonstration. But now we can ask those questions online. We can type them in. We can do a search and like, hey, this is how you make this look better, or this is how you can make this look different. And it's there. So the urge to go out and be social isn't there as much as I think it used to be. And I think that's unfortunate, because I really enjoyed that aspect back in the 80s and 90s of going to a store and hanging out with people that were like-minded and play some games and share some stories and stuff. It was fun.
Yeah, no, I agree. And certainly to the younger folks that might listen, probably makes us sound like old fogies, put down your phone and paint. That's really it. And think of it this way too. No matter how good of a picture you take, the picture is still not an accurate representation of what a model you're working on looks like in real life. A lot of times when you get online feedback, you have to kind of take it with a grain of salt because they can only see what you post. However, if you hand somebody the model and they see it in real life and in real light, they're like, okay, now you can work on, they can give good feedback that way. I mean, so even from a feedback a feedback position, going to a group is much better. Putting your stuff in a competition is better because you can physically put your get comments and stuff from people who can see your stuff in real life. I mean, you're absolutely right. I think technology has hurt a bit, and you're right. We could do a whole show on the drop off. I know there was one at Huzzah Hobbies we were doing that the first 5 or 6 times there was about 12, 13 people there, which is a really good turnout. And then boom, all of a sudden the hobby group is over. The paint club is done.
Yeah, it really sucks.
And you're like, all right. Yeah, the last time that there was a scheduled paint club for that, I went, nobody else showed up. And for me, it's a 30 to 40 minute drive to that place. So,
yeah,
oh well, such is life. Maybe another time things will reopen. Maybe we could figure out a way that we could do a listening to paint dry paint club. Who knows? We'll broach that subject down the road. But so the awesome part of this episode, besides just us blabbering about, is we're actually going to we will have an interview with Uncle Adam from Tabletop Minions. And one of the things that we get into is a conversation about what has changed in the hobby. And he's been in the hobby a long time. And it's really kind of nice to talk to somebody who kind of comes from that same perspective. And so we'll have that in just a moment added to the show. And so, yeah, I don't know what else we want to add to here before we go into the interview. There's an upcoming show if you're in the Northern Virginia area, or even if you're not. Richmond has the International Plastic Modeler Society show, February 22nd, and 29th, excuse me, February 29th, 2020. Good stuff. It's supposed to be huge. And I was told that the fantasy and sci-fi keeps growing at those too. So bring your models if you're in the area, put them in the contest. And what I also understand is one of the great reasons to go there is they have a ton of vendors. And so that's always a good thing to go blow some cash, right?
Yeah, actually that is.
And it's another one of those things. It's nice to shop online, etc., but it is so much more fun to go to a hobby store, right? It's so much more enjoyable to actually physically look through the products and move actually get to see what you're looking at before you buy it. So that's a big thing.
And that's a whole nother show too. Remember, you gotta support your brick and mortars because they're the ones that are putting this stuff out there for us to put together, and they give us locations to play. So if you don't support them, it's kind of hard to figure out what you want to buy by looking online.
Right, and even though like some of them, like Games Workshops, if you deliver to their store gets credit as well. So like if I order something at the Tower Center store or online and have it shipped to the Tower Center store, that Tower Center store gets credit for that sale.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's always a good thing to support the stores. And I usually try to, I have like 4 or 5 things that they're small, but I buy every time I go to a hobby store. Like I always buy dropper bottles because I'll always need dropper bottles. Things along those dropper bottles, sanding sticks, stuff like that are just I constantly burn through in the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some crap paint brushes too, as well, because those are another things that I have a big a big pencil case full of crap brushes. So, but yeah, definitely we could do a brick and mortar show. So the only other thing I wanted to point out was if you have thoughts, questions, comments about the show, want to show us what you're working on, have ideas for a future show or stuff that you want to cover, have a question you want to ask, you can email us at listeningtopaintdry@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Instagram at Listening to Paint Dry and Facebook at Listening to Paint Dry. We will at some point down the road have a website. I do own a domain name, but life, hobbying, all that, and doing the podcast, I'll get to the website at some point. So, but otherwise, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Uncle Adam, for joining us today and listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan. We're here at the Nova Open. How's your experience been so far?
It's been pretty good, honestly. It's this is my second Nova, and it's been this year. I'm actually teaching classes here. Well, I take that back. I did teach classes last year, but this year I'm teaching painting classes. I taught one literally just about an hour ago, and I'm teaching another one tonight. And they're both about cutting corners. They're both about how to get stuff on the tabletop quicker. If you're a person who's a gamer, but you want to still have stuff that at least looks like it's been painted to some degree and doesn't look too bad, there are a lot of cool and easy ways to, frankly, find efficiencies and cut corners and make things happen that you can get stuff on the table and it's not as hard as you might think. So that's been good. The first class went well, and it's like I said, I think the second one's going to go just as well.
And you're also teaching a class on how to do YouTube as well. Correct?
Yeah, I taught that one on what's today, Saturday. I taught that one on Thursday.
Okay.
And and that one usually I have that separated into two classes, where there's one that's more the technical stuff, cameras and editing and lighting and audio. And then the other one is usually more the like the branding and the strategy and the marketing and that kind of stuff. This year I kind of squished both those together into the class that I did on Thursday. And then mainly just so that I didn't have to, we kind of did it that way so we could kind of catch both here. That class was, I think I probably had about 14 people in that class, but the painting classes both sold out. So that's
wonderful.
Pretty good. Yeah. I'm glad that people are interested.
Excellent. So tell me, how did you get into wargaming to begin with?
Well, let's see. In middle school, in grade school, late grade school, like fifth grade, a guy introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay.
And so I started playing some of that here and there. And then in middle school, another guy introduced me to BattleTech. And so we were playing BattleTech, and this was back before there were miniatures for it. I mean, well, there may have been miniatures, but he didn't have any. We were just using little cardboard standees, on the hex maps and all that kind of stuff. Yep. And it worked out well, and we had a lot of fun. But we were young kids, and like all of that extra, paperwork and everything at the time seemed very interesting. And there weren't great video games that could basically do the same thing as quickly. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But so I was interested in that, and it was cool. And we had fun with it. And then when I got into college, a friend was like, "Hey, let's play this game that I've got called Space Hulk." And so that was my first introduction to Games Workshop. Okay. So like while we were playing the game and it was a lot of fun, we were having a great time with it, there was all of this fluff, even in the relatively thin books that came with that particular box set. There's not big, thick books in those necessarily, but they were still talking about the Emperor and about the Imperium of Man and the Tyranids and all this kind of stuff. And it was like kind of peeking behind the curtain a little bit and kind of starting to see that stuff. But I didn't get into actual 40K until 5th edition. I was probably, 30 or whatever, something like that. I was getting into miniatures and getting into terrain previous to that, but I was always looking for skirmish games, and there weren't many back then. Right. So, but I didn't
now
want...
there's bazillions skirmish
exactly,
games.
Exactly. Now it's an amazing time to get started. But when I was trying to do it, I was trying to find skirmish games because I didn't want to have an entire army. It seemed like a lot. I didn't have the money for it at the time, and I also just didn't have the... I think I didn't think I had the time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Ain't that the truth? The expense and time. Those are
exactly.
The biggest challenges with this hobby.
So I was trying to find skirmish games and do that kind of stuff, and I was finding things here and there that were kind of online in the early days of online and whatnot. And then 5th edition came along, and I found some friends that were playing it, and so then I started with my Tau army, and then I moved from Tau to Chaos, and then I just kind of gone from there. I kind of stopped playing GW stuff in 7th edition. I only played a couple of games in 7th edition, and I moved into things like Malifaux and Song of Blades and Heroes and a bunch of different stuff, and I really still enjoyed painting and doing all of that. But then when 8th edition came out, everything got kind of revitalized, and then Kill Team, and now Kill Team's my game. Like that's what I play. I also play Age of Sigmar. I honestly haven't played a ton of. I played some 8th edition 40K, but I generally prefer the smaller games, Right. So I'm playing Kill Team. I'm playing even Age of Sigmar around our local area. Like 1,000 points is kind of standard, so that's still a relatively small
game. Yeah, absolutely.
But then I've been playing a bunch of other stuff, and I've been building and prepping to play games like again, more kind of indie stuff like Zone Raiders. I really enjoy.
I haven't heard that one.
It's relatively new. It came out this year on Kickstarter, and the guy who wrote it had a booth at the Las Vegas Open back in February, and that's where I first heard about it. And he was talking about it and how the Kickstarter was coming soon, so I get on the Kickstarter. And it's basically it's a far in the future kind of skirmish sci-fi game, and humans have kind of separated into two factions. You've got your post-humans who've become uploaded into the singularity and all that kind of jazz, and they've built a Dyson sphere that goes around. Not sure if it's our sun or if it's just a star, but it's this machine that you build that you completely encase a star so you can draw the power from it to power the machine. But they're not really in the game. They're just sort of these kind of unseen, entities. But then there are regular in air quotes, humans that live in the layers of this Dyson sphere and don't remember Earth because they've been there for so long, for so many millions of years. And some of them have evolved this way and some have kind of evolved that way. So they're basically stowaways inside this machine. And what's really cool, besides the fact that you get to make whatever kind of models you want to some degree. They have factions, but they don't have a model line that comes with the game. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, you do what you want, build the things you want to do. And then, but they do have factions in the book to tell you, well, there's these guys and these people and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. But also there's the terrain is so alien because it's a machine that was not designed for people to work on it. So there's no railings. Okay. Nothing is OSHA approved. You know what I mean? Like, these people are living amongst this stuff, and they're sometimes living in these villages up amongst all these giant cooling towers for, hundreds of years. And all of a sudden one day the cooling tower is disassembled by robots and moved away, and there's a whole thing. And so it's a really cool concept. And I love the fact that I can go real custom with the models. That's like kind of I still enjoy like good models and good like GW stuff and like, things that you see on the shelves in every store. But I also really like to be able to take like a whole bunch of parts and build my own thing. And I like that. That's kind of my new thing these days.
It kind of sounds like a good avenue, too, if you were somebody who collected things like Reaper miniatures and such that are kind of lower expense models.
And then you can cut them apart and do all kinds of stuff to them. I did a bunch of post-apocalyptic models, and it's a mixture of Reaper stuff and GW stuff and things like that. Cutting off this arm and putting a different arm on that looks pretty good, but once you paint it, and like then you can't even notice. And, if you do it right. That kind of conversion and stuff like that is, to me, these days, one of the kind of interesting things that I really kind of like to sort of follow around and try to see.
So you're kind of drawn to the customization and being able to put your footprint on a...
I've always kind of customized the stuff a little bit, not necessarily in straight up building conversions, but it's rare that I ever paint it like it should look on the box, you know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. My first Tau, when I put them together in 5th edition, like Tau, they always showed them in that kind of sand desert color,
Yep.
And I didn't go that direction. Part of it was because I wanted to paint them as quickly as possible, so I went and I found like a red oxide auto primer at the auto parts store, and I sprayed them this kind of dark red, and then I took an orange spray paint and I dusted them from above for the highlight.
Sure.
And then I was already, I just done 2 steps, but I'd already primed, base coated, and highlighted, so then it was very easy to then kind of start doing the details and the washes, and it was done. So I cranked through them real quick, but I didn't like the fact that Tau you don't convert them too much. You don't see Tau with spikes. You don't see which is why I ended up moving into Chaos. So because you can do a lot more wacky conversion. Obviously, orcs are probably the king of that, but I didn't want to go full that direction.
Right, there's no Tau with the rack of skulls on their back.
Generally not. No, they're not into that. Yeah.
For sure. So what over your time period in gaming, what do you think the biggest change has been?
I would say the technology, honestly, has been one of the biggest things, because if you look at models even from 10 years ago, we're talking at this point 2009.
Right.
A lot of times when I think 10 years ago, I think 1999, but that's actually 20 years ago. But when you even go back as far as 10 years ago, the models in comparison have much finer detail, and the quality is just higher. There's just more detail in the faces. There's more detail in the hands. There's more like the little bits and things like that. So that's a big deal. And the fact that small companies can get away with doing more of that kind of stuff too, not necessarily in the hard plastic because the molds are incredibly expensive, but you're even seeing small companies now with 3D printing and high-end 3D printing be able to make really high-end masters that they can at least then get resin or metal, made from and stuff like that, and do good work that way, which I really enjoy. the paint technologies as well between, like people used to not have washes. You know what I mean? You had to make your own, or
That was
whatever.
me.
Right,
I was
exactly.
saying,
Yeah.
when I came back to the hobby after 25 years and they handed me a pot of Nuln Oil, I
Yeah.
went, what is this voodoo?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, exactly. Yeah, no, it's liquid talent. You know
Right.
what I mean? And that's great because you'll obviously have people who are like, well, I don't like that because it makes things too easy, or I used to do it the old way, or whatever. And that's great. But this hobby always needs new people in it. And when you can show them, look, you can do this really quickly. And that's literally what I was doing in my class an hour ago. I was saying, look, when you use a wash when you first prime in a color and then highlight with another color, and you've just done rattle can, and then you throw a wash on it, wait for that to dry, and do some dry brush, and you've already got a Space Marine that looks this good after 4 steps. Getting all of them done is not that big of a deal. If you had to go through and wet blend all those fades and shades and all that kind of stuff on every single model, you would never get it done. But when you can literally in an afternoon do 5 squads of guys and make them all have nice fades and all that kind of stuff, and all that, and then go back in and do all the shading and whatnot with the washes, and then do some edge highlighting if you want to. I was teaching those people in the class. Edge highlighting is a real pain for a lot of people. It's really hard. I'm not good at it at all. But I will get a makeup brush, a cheap one from the dollar store, and I will use that and go to town for dry brushing, and it will look like really good edge highlighting. I've seen with those really big makeup brushes, I've seen people who've gotten effects that look like airbrush.
Right.
Just with the brush,
Oh, yeah.
with this makeup
I think
brush.
Vince Venturella is a big makeup brush
Yep.
advocate. Absolutely.
I did a video about that, about makeup brushes too, because actually it was my friend Terry Latorco who originally told me about it, and I was like,
That's that Metalhead Minis?
No, that's Lynn Stahl. Terry
Lynn Stahl,
Latorco had a channel, or still does have a channel called That Terry Girl.
Okay.
And now she's a director of marketing for Renegade Game Studios, actually. So she's kind of moved into the business side. But yeah, as she was the one who's like, oh yeah, these makeup brushes are amazing. So I went and searched some out, picked them up at Walmart, came home and started messing with them. And I was like, wow. And so I made a video about it. But yeah.
See, I have teenage girls, so I steal theirs because they steal they take my hair dryer.
Sure,
so
right.
Stuff like that. I'm like, I'm glazing. I need the hair dryer.
Oh, yeah,
I gotta go to their room. But,
but I find that stuff I think has really changed the painting hobby of it, and just there's the modeling and painting. But then in the gaming aspect, just the fact that like specifically Games Workshop, but other companies also following suit, is that the lower barrier to entry, the skirmish games, all that kind of stuff. I mean, even as little as like 4 years ago, if you wanted to get into a Games Workshop game, which was still at the time, even though they were not doing great, they were still the biggest in the industry.
Right.
If you wanted to get into that, it was you were either going to start playing 40K or you were going to have to play fantasy. Those were your two options.
Right.
And both of them were big hills to climb.
And massive expense to put out.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was pleased when they put out the push together models.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's definitely a huge because that barrier is.
And now you can get into Kill Team. You can like literally, for $40 you buy the book. And I did a video about how to build an army for $50 or less, and show different armies and different boxes you can use and things like that. So you're able to then do that exact thing. Like if you can actually buy the rules and get an army, I'm assuming you probably already have dice. You can use lots of different things for terrain, but you can also build it from scratch down the road if you want to or whatever. But yeah, you can play that game for less than $100.
Right. Your recycling bin's an amazing place to get terrain stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my favorite. That's my favorite thing to use.
Yeah.
I'd say between recycling and the dollar store, I wouldn't have bases and terrain.
Oh,
Those would be my two number one places. But so I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you too. Well, I'll say this: you do have a video that I can't watch.
Okay.
That aging video that you just put out, I'm
Right.
like, it's too close to home
Oh,
yet.
sure.
I'll watch it a little bit later.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, I was noticing it myself, honestly, with the, I've got progressive lens
Same
glasses.
here,
And, but I was noticing that when I was painting, I was generally pulling them down and looking over the top of them. And after a couple hours of doing that, focusing close that way over the top of my glasses, I ended up getting like this eye strain headache. And it got to the point, like I said in the video, where I just started taking ibuprofen ahead of time before I went down to paint, which is not a good idea.
No, right.
And so I started looking into some of those kind of head magnifiers. Like some people like the lamp, that you clamp on that's got the magnifier in the middle with the round, bulb around it, stuff like that. I don't like that because I feel like I move around too much, so that lamp doesn't move and I'm moving everything else. Whereas with the goofy looking, admittedly, kind of glasses or whatever that you put on, it sticks to my head. So as I move, it moves,
It
and it's
moves
fine. But
I always hit I have one of the ones with the arm too. I
Mhm.
always hit the
oh, you
the
hit the
magnifier
arm.
with
Oh,
the brush,
sure.
and
Yeah.
it screws me up. But
Yeah, so I do like the this magnifying headset thing because I used to have an old one years ago that I never used much. That was like a big Velcro strapper on the back, and it had this black thing that came down.
Right.
And yeah,
like the
and-
original jeweler's
Oh,
loop
yeah, exactly.
type thing,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And I just was like found that really difficult for painting. But this new kind where it's more like it goes on like glasses, and it's got an actual bridge for your nose, and
Right.
Interchangeable lenses, so you can go with different magnifications and things like that. And it was super cheap.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, you can
so-
get them off of eBay.
I got mine on Amazon for like, I don't know, $17 or
Right.
maybe less.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's really helped me out a lot. And honestly, it's getting to the point now where there's times when I'll pull something up and I just want to paint something quick, and I'll be like, why can't I see that? Oh yeah, that's right. And I'll go put that thing on real quick, and then I can now see what I'm doing a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, we all, as it turns out, we're all getting older. Pretty much
Right.
all of us, most of us, are all getting older. And
Yeah.
so we think that thought it was a good idea to make a video about it. So you can watch it in a couple of years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Well, I'm already in my 40s, so I'm not sure how much the aging is going to get. But that's a great segue, because what I wanted to ask you too is what made you decide to do a YouTube channel?
Yeah, so basically it kind of started when in 2010 I was watching videos from folks over in Ireland, Northern Ireland, Beasts of War.
Okay. Yeah.
And I was watching a bunch of their videos because they had really good production value, and I really enjoyed that and everything. And they had a video, I think in July or so, that talked about how they were updating their website and doing new things to it and whatever, and all that kind of stuff. And then it also in the title mentioned Gen Con. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe those guys are going to Gen Con. I can meet them because I go to Gen Con, so that's great. So I watched the video, and at the end, they didn't mention that they were going to Gen Con. They just said, hey, Gen Con's coming up, and if you're going to Gen Con, let us know in the comments below. So I said in the comments, yeah, I've been going to Gen Con since 92 and whatnot. And then I went to bed because it was late. And then they're like 6 hours ahead over there.
Right.
So I wake up in the morning, and I've got an email from them or a message or something. They contacted me in some way, and they were like, hey, do you have a camera that has HD? Do you have a microphone? Do you have all this stuff? Would you be interested in talking to people while you were there and all this kind of jazz? And so that's how I became their U.S. correspondent.
Oh, nice.
So I would go to Gen Con and Adepticon, and I would interview game company marketing folks and designers and all these different things. They'd say, talk to these guys, talk to these guys, talk to these guys. And so I was doing that. It's now what Dawn and Gianna from from Beasts of War are doing.
Mm-hmm.
They're basically going generally to Gen Con and Adepticon and doing a bunch of interviews, and then that stuff shows up on the Beasts of War, which is now on tabletop. But anyway,
Right.
after a couple of years of doing that, I really wanted to learn how to do video production myself, and I was shooting, and it was fine. I went to school for photography, so that made sense, but I wanted to learn more about the editing and the audio and all that jazz.
Right.
And so I thought I wanted to start my own channel, and I felt it was going to be like a conflict of interest if I was doing stuff for two channels at the time or whatever. So, we had a very amicable, I'm done working for you guys, I'm going to start my own thing.
Sure.
And I started in March of 2013.
Well,
And-
it feels like that with a hobby, there's a lot of community.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
working, lifting up.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that they weren't like, they were like,
Yeah.
go,
Oh, yeah.
go forth, spread your wings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So-
And so I wanted to learn video production was really the why I started it. And I made videos for about 2.5 years, and I was kind of all over the board as far as like there'd be 3 weeks between videos, and then it'd be like a week, and then there'd be a month, and then there would be 4 days, and it was just all over the place. As I did that for about 2.5 years, and then I hit about 10,000 subscribers. At that point, I decided, this was in like October-ish of 2015, I decided I should try to be a little bit more serious about this. So I'm going to give it a try. So I decided I'm going to start making videos every single Friday,
Okay.
and I'm just not going to miss. And I had read some things on, different articles and whatnot about how consistency is key for something like YouTube, because
Right.
it's the algorithm looks and sees if you post on a regular schedule over and over again, they know that you're more serious, and so they will up your video rank and whatnot to some degree. So it's a help, and it was a goal.
Right.
So I started putting up videos every Friday, and by December I noticed that my analytics started to climb, and
Mhm.
things started going well, so now it's in October, it'll be 4 years since
Right.
I've been doing it every Friday, and that's kind of. But at that same time, when I decided I'm going to start doing this more, steadily, and I'm going to start doing this consistently and become more serious about it, I also changed focus of the channel. Because before I just was like kind of doing some tutorials and just it was all over the board. Again, like I said, I was really literally trying to learn more about video than I was trying to teach. But when I decided to get more serious about it, I also decided to make a mission or like a focus for the channel more about getting new people into the hobby.
Right.
And not just into the gaming, although that's a big deal of it as well, but also to get them into the painting, because I personally believe, and I'm sure that you'll probably back me up on this, that this particular hobby is an amazing stress reliever. It's meditative. You know, coming home from work and all of the troubles you may have or whatever that is, and sitting down in your like hobby area and working on a model, painting it, listening to an audiobook, listening to a podcast, listening to music, listening to Netflix, whatever is your jam, really, really helps to kind of keep a person centered. I think it's meditative. So I think more people need a hobby where they're focusing and working with their hands. It doesn't have to be this hobby. I like this hobby a lot, so this is the one that I tell people about. My dad used to tie flies. He was a
fly
fisherman.
Yeah.
He used to do that. There's all kinds of things you could do as opposed to, you know, watching horrible people on TV say horrible things to each other or whatever, you know, and that does not help your stress, in my opinion, but whatever. So exactly, like that really became the focus of the channel and why I wanted to do it. So I wanted to get more people in the hobby to hopefully help people to feel less stress, honestly.
Well, I mean, and you've done well too. If I read your analytics right, you're at 147,000 subscribers, 1.8 million likes on videos.
Sure.
414 videos. Is that the number?
Yeah, it's over a little over 400. Yeah.
Yeah, that is impressive. And I know people like me. When I got back into the hobby, you're one of the very first names that popped up. People pointed me to go watch videos from you, and that's
because I also focus on people who are lapsed, you know, and who are coming back and are not sure how to start or how to get back into it and stuff like that. Because that's a lot of hobbies I've noticed have a tendency to assume that you already know what they're talking about,
right?
And so that is sometimes difficult for getting new people into them. You know, they assume you understand the jargon, they understand, you know, the nicknames, the code words, and that kind of stuff. But you have to be actually very clear if you're trying to be inclusive to new people who want to come into the hobby.
Right, and I think I found a few times where kind of gaming groups can be cliquey at stores.
Oh, certainly, yeah.
And so they can be hard to break in that way. But
yeah.
I will say that like employees, like anybody I've worked with, GW or a hobby store, have all been always been insanely welcoming.
Certainly,
and, you know, and so it's an interesting dichotomy. But then you turn to the internet, and you can ask any artist, like, "Hey, man, how did you paint that?" And I have yet to not get a response. You know what I mean? Somebody's always said, you know, what they're doing. So it's an amazing, between the internet and washpots, right? Huge changes. Like, now, what do you find is the biggest challenge for doing something like YouTube and being out there on social media?
I mean, the biggest challenge is probably going to be something along the lines of just motivation and consistency. Like being consistent, you know, you can tell people consistency is key. We're all basically kind of lazy humans. You know what I mean? Like we all want to sometimes just sit around and veg or whatever, and that's fine. But if you want to get places with like for me, this has become basically like a second job, you know, like I'm making some income from it, which I then put back into buying, you know, crazy camera stuff like this and flying to places like DC for the Nova Open and whatnot and all that kind of stuff. But I still got a day job, you know, which luckily dovetails into this because the day job, one of the things we do with the day job is we make that app, you know, we make Game 4 for connecting tabletop gamers and everything. So when I go to a convention and I talk to game people, I'm also talking about the app and stuff so that their work is fine with it and all that kind of stuff. And it's been nice, but not everybody's got that. So the big challenge in some situations is just finding the time, finding the motivation, finding all that kind of stuff. It's also, if you don't like to learn, it's also a real bummer because I like to learn. And because of that, that's great because I've got so many things to learn about video production and I went to school for photography. But I still, there's new cameras every day, you know, and all that kind of stuff and things to kind of, and just creativity and all that kind of stuff can kind of sometimes beat you down a little bit. But it is like for me, the every Friday thing is it's just become natural. It's what I assume being fit must be like. You know what I mean? Like when you get fit, you get to this point where you're like, well, I didn't run today, and now I just don't feel right. And it was just like, it's just in your brain saying, I should have run today, or I need to run still yet today. I mean, Lord knows I don't have that, but I do have, by the time it's Wednesday, I'm like, I don't have that video that even started yet. It makes me nervous, it makes me anxious and stuff. Right. So I got to get it done. Whereas when I first started, it was like, I just don't think I'm going to make a video this week.
Right.
And that's, you can do that if you want to, but if you want to be a little bit more successful at it, the consistency is key.
Excellent. It's also every other Sunday, right? You also have a show every other Sunday.
About 2.5 years ago, I think, I started doing a live show, and I've been doing this every other Sunday. And those I just do live stream on YouTube from home, honestly, from my dining room table. And so there's cat noises and wife noises in the background.
Sure,
and cars outside and things like that and whatever. But yeah, it's that show started out where it was going to be me painting or building and then kind of talking about it and then maybe answering some questions. And it turns out I am terrible at trying to read the chat, answer questions, and paint and or build at the same time. I just can't do it. People like Sam, who paints on my channel from time to time, Sam Lenz, he's amazing on Twitch. He could be painting at an incredibly high level and reading the chat and answering all the questions, and it's astounding. But I'm not built
him
that.
And Shoshi Bauer are just they've got the skills to be able to do.
So what I do instead is I just basically answer people's questions. I read the chat and answer questions. I can do that. Trying to also add in painting or building at the same time doesn't work out for me. But because of that show has become almost like a podcast.
Right.
You really don't need to watch because it's normally just my face. Every once in a while I cut away to a web page and talk about something or whatever, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, you can just be listening to me answering questions from the chat, and hopefully you'll learn something. It's just great background noise for painting.
I was actually going to say that I actually listen to it when I paint. It's a definitely thing. So the motto of our podcast is better, braver, happier. Do you have any advice for people out there to how to become a better and braver, happier painter? Things that are like kind of tips and tricks for them?
I would say absolutely number one is don't compare yourself to other people. Compare your current, if you're trying to get better, because not everybody's trying to get better.
Sure.
Some people are happy completely with where they're at, and that's cool, and they're just doing it because they enjoy the actual action of doing it, which is awesome. Yeah. But if you are trying to improve, never compare yourself to other painters. Only compare your current paint job to your last paint job. If the paint job you just finished is better than the last one, then you're doing better, and that's all you need to do. Because if it's like when you see people on the magazine covers, and you're like, man, I'm not as good looking as that person. Well, they're not as good looking as that person because it's a lot of Photoshop and whatever. But it's also a ton of time that they spent. When you're looking at another painter who's like down in the case downstairs, or right over there actually, in the crystal, the Capitol Palette. It's I would bet none of those people just picked up a brush for the first time this month. You know what I mean? Like they've been doing it for decades, and so that's why they look amazing. And when you've just started, obviously your stuff's not going to look that way. If you've just started as a skier, you're not going to be as good as a pro skier who's been doing it for 30 years. That kind of stuff. It just kind of works that way. So yeah, comparing yourself to yourself, if you're trying to get better, is the best way to do it. But don't compare yourself to other people. It's really hard on your psyche and your production. Yeah,
I've noticed that too. That's one of the pitfalls of social media is that you can see all this work done by these amazing artists.
Sure.
You can go one of two ways. You can want to throw your brushes away, or go and I want to be like that.
I just did a video. I think it was on Friday. About inspiration, and there are obviously plenty of places to get inspired as far as like looking on Instagram, looking in White Dwarf and things like that. But there's a lot of other places to get inspiration. Though the places that I talked about for inspiration were not quite. I want to get inspired to get better, but it's more along the lines of I want to get inspired to like be more creative. Like I want to make some terrain. I can draw inspiration from video games, or from books maybe even, or from movies on how to build this stuff. Whereas if you want to just get better at terrain, well, you can draw inspiration from other people who build amazing terrain. But if you want to make stuff that looks different and interesting, then I find that the inspiration comes from other places, other types of media.
So thank you so much for joining us. I don't want to keep you too long. I know you got a bunch of stuff to do. You can find Uncle Adam on Tabletop Minions on YouTube.
Correct.
And are you on Instagram or Facebook?
Yep. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. It's Tabletop Minions on both. On Facebook, there's the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club where you can go and people share pictures of work in progress, finished stuff, and ask questions about, like how do I do this? How do I do that? And other people give answers and things like that. It's a good sized group, probably I think 16,000 people right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not bad. I find, again, inspiration can come from a lot of different places, and sometimes it can come from people, on even places like Facebook. As troublesome as Facebook can be, it can still sometimes give you some nuggets.
It's like alcohol. It's an amazing solution and the cause of problems, right? So the internet and Facebook and such.
The cause and solution to many of life's problems.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege to meet you.
Absolutely.
And I want to make sure that you know that people like me appreciate all of what you do for the hobby and such, and you really help us become better, braver, and happier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Dan and I would like to thank Uncle Adam from Tabletop Minions for joining us on the show today. He is a highly skilled teacher, an incredible artist. I love his work, and just an overall wonderful person. Thank you so much for your patience with me and all my gaffes, including the not good kind of mic drop at the very beginning. And also, thank you so much for all the hard work and time you put into the community. Over 400 plus videos for free on your YouTube page. That's kind of insane. Follow him on Instagram at Tabletop Minions or on YouTube at Tabletop Minions, as well as on Facebook. If you're not subscribing to a show, you're not getting as much education as you could. Make sure you definitely check him out. We'll be back next week with a mini episode review, and then in 2 weeks with another full episode. So, until then, remember, the only thing that really needs to change in the hobby is for you to keep becoming a better, braver, and happier painter. Until next time. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.